Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Reruns. Now let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Cubulon. Let Aya handle your planning and even your creative writing for you. Aya, the AI of the future. Welcome everyone to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We do stuff behind and in front of the camera in our day-to-day professional lives, and then come and spew all that built-up knowledge and insight into a movie that we're looking at, if you will. Some of you will not. And that's, about the 290th time we've described what we do, and it keeps getting funnier every time I say it. So with that in mind, there's a lot to get to. Bro, what are we covering today?
Today we are covering Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. So if you haven't seen it, it's out in theaters this weekend that when we're recording this. If you haven't seen it, please pause this episode, go watch it. And as a recommendation, watch Beetlejuice, the first Beetlejuice, because we're going to talk about both. You can't talk about this without talking about the original. So
agreed, sir. We'll look at we'll actually look at a lot of stuff. We're definitely going to touch on cinematography, look at close-ups versus medium and wides for comedy and connection. We'll dive heavily into story and writing, talk about the but therefore storytelling method. If you've seen that Matt Parker, Trey Stone, or Matt Stone, Trey Parker video that I think we've all seen it a number of times, and it's so cool every time we see it. And so I thought, why not? We'll apply it to these stories. And we'll also look at some of the sequels honoring their predecessors. We'll talk about Lydia's arc and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. After a family tragedy, 3 generations of the Deetz family return home to Winter River. Still haunted by Beetlejuice, Lydia's life is turned upside down when her teenage daughter, Astrid, accidentally opens the portal to the afterlife. It's directed by Tim Burton, screenplay by Alfred Gough and Miles Millar, cinematography by Harris Zambarloukos, featuring Winona Ryder as Lydia, Catherine O'Hara as Delia, Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice, Jenna Ortega as Astrid, Justin Theroux as Rory, Willem Dafoe as Wolf Jackson, and Monica Bellucci as Delores.
What? Why? No!
Maria, what's wrong?
Oh, I'm trying to capture the perfect primal scream. I'm going to blow it up, mount it on the wall, and I invite all of you to do the same.
Why?
For the collective. We cannot sincerely celebrate all that was good about our dearly departed, not until we release the horror that they inflicted upon us.
Oh my God. I was helpfully getting some boxes in town, then I heard you screaming. Are you all right?
It was Delia.
Oh, Delia.
I'm good.
Ignore her.
All right, man. So the more I've thought about Beetlejuice, and I've spent most of my week thinking about the original Beetlejuice, the more I've realized how much of an impact that movie made on me as a kid, like way more than I thought. Like a lot of my comedy and humor came from Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice. Like me and one of my best friends would just joke and use that style of humor, his physicality, the crazy energy, the voice, hey, look at me. All that kind of stuff was
pretty
just
good.
Embedded things all throughout my childhood until Ace Ventura came along, and then it became like an amalgamation. Lydia lived as a rent-free character in my head alongside Beetlejuice. Like this surprisingly was a massive influence on my life. With that, walking into Beetlejuice, a lot of expectations. How did it go for you, man?
Well, my experience was a little weird in the theater because I had a small child running up and down the aisle next to me, and it was being very loud. It was so annoying.
That's terrible.
And then they literally stopped at that moment. They literally stopped the movie because some woman behind me, like passed out and threw up or something. It was like very strange. And then, so the movie was stopped for about 10 minutes while they had to like get her out of the theater, and like it was, and then they gave me a free pass. It was weird. It was so weird. So I need to see it again for a little bit better of an experience, but it was strange. It was so much so that I came home and I told Jenny, I was like, I don't know what just happened. Like, so strange. Anyway, I don't know if she was drunk or what. I don't know.
Hopefully, yeah, obviously.
Hopefully, yes,
she didn't
exactly.
have like an aneurysm and then halfway die in the theater.
Yeah. So there was that, but let me start with some of the
like
good.
how do you even begin after that?
Yeah, some of the good stuff. The good stuff.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's always good to see these characters that you grew up with again. You know, I Catherine O'Hara, anytime she's on screen, I'm happy. You know?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm so glad that clip was what you played, was a clip of her, because she made the movie for me, to be honest. I mean, I love other characters too, but she is everything. Without her in this movie, it would be not really anything, to be honest. I love seeing Michael Keaton in this role. I think that it wouldn't be anything without him. That being said, I thought that it was, well, let me keep going with the good stuff. So let me see. I like Jenna Ortega in this role. I think that the casting was good. She needs to be dark like her mother in a way, but still kind of, I like that she doesn't believe her mother, that's part of the storyline, that they are kind of a little bit estranged. And she's mad at her because, like, you know, why wouldn't she be? I like that their story that we don't get, that we get from the narrative, which is her father has passed, but they were estranged, or that they had divorced or something, or separated, that Lydia had separated from him before that happened. And we only get that from that one interaction with them on the bench, I think at the funeral. So I need to see it again, but I don't think that they talk about that a whole lot, but at least just a little bit. So unless you're paying attention, you don't really get that story. And I like that. I like it when stories make you watch them. They make you pay attention. Let's see. That being said, I mean, and I do like the practicality, like all the practical effects that they do, instead of CGI. You know, I know that Tim Burton is big on that, and I think that he adhered to that as much as possible. I like the sandworm; it looked exactly the same as before. You know, like with the kind of choppiness, like where it felt like claymation. You know, maybe it is. I don't know how they did that. I don't know. So I liked all of that. That being said, I just have to go with my first feeling, which is I feel like Michael Keaton. I don't know if this was written into the script, but he's just kind of flat. He's not
freaking men.
Okay, thank you. I was waiting at some point every time we saw Beetlejuice for him to like, okay, now he's going to turn it on. But especially after we did Beetlejuice last week, and I had rewatched it, I realized he was just perfect in that film. As Beetlejuice, he was perfect. He was always over the top, and he was always talking about this, and he was always really fast, and I got to do it. And then when you get serious, he'd be like, well, I got to tell you. You get like, you know, so he, not only with his body, but with his voice, he would let you know, now I'm over the top, and I'm dressed like you, and then, you know, like, hey, baby, you want to come back to my... He would do a lot of voice acting too. And I never got that. I kept feeling like at some point he's going to turn it on and be the Beetlejuice from 30 years ago. And we never got that. And I don't know. I also, and I didn't call this out before because I didn't want to tell you anything that I had seen, but I saw an interview with him where he said the only way I'd do it is if a couple of things. One, if we didn't do a lot of CGI, right? If we did everything practical, and if Beetlejuice isn't on screen for more time than he was in the first one, because, you know, sequels fall into this trope where, oh, this worked really well, let's just do that, you know, in the sequel, and he didn't want to do that. So I was hopeful. I was like, oh, great. There is no way in hell Because I think he's on screen for like 17 minutes in the first one. There is no way in hell this is only 17 minutes that he was on screen. It has to be double that. I mean, the whole thing was a storyline around his ex-wife hunting him down in the afterlife. How could he possibly be on screen for the same amount of time? No possible way. The story became all about Beetlejuice and less about, you know, the narrative of what's happening in the house. And which completely defeated what I was expecting to go into and what I wanted. I mean, honestly, the best part of this movie, I already said, was Catherine O'Hara. She's fantastic. I thought the storyline of Lydia getting married off, you know, to either the guy she's seeing, her manager, what's his name? To Rory, either her Rory, thank you. To either Rory or to Beetlejuice. I'm just like, why? I didn't get it. It got really long too. But I can't say that it was long because of the situation. Sure. I said what happened. You know, I was in the theater for a lot longer than the actual movie, you know, was. But and then her Astrid's boyfriend or boy interest. Okay, here's one of the biggest issues I had. The biggest issue was Michael Keaton's performance of Beetlejuice is just flat. The second biggest is, okay, one of the main problems, like the main antagonizer of this film is Rory, right? Because he's basically trying to kill Astrid. He's trying to switch places, right? We're leading up to this. And then in a second, he's just gone. Like okay, and this goes deeper. So in a second, he's just gone, and I'm expecting like something else to happen. Maybe we cut to him in hell, you know, later on, and we see that he's being ripped apart or something like that, you know. Or I don't know. It could have been more creative, taken a little bit more, you know, care in that moment, because we're seeing him for a lot of the film, and he's like a big antagonistic thing, and we find out this thing about him, which is really interesting, which I didn't expect. I didn't expect him to be dead. I didn't expect that he was a bad guy either, you know? So I find out, oh, he's dead. Oh, cool. Okay. Oh, wait, he's a bad guy. He actually killed his parents. Oh, okay. This is interesting. The other bad part about this is that Lydia signs an agreement with Beetlejuice to marry him if he helps her. He helps her. He saves her daughter from death. And then she just blows him up, and like, I felt bad for him. Literally, he executed the agreement as requested. He went through with it. Without Beetlejuice, she would be dead. And yet, he's still the bad guy at the end of the film. I thought this was going to be a redemption movie. At that point, I thought, oh, they're teaming up together. It's going to be a redemption movie. Maybe he'll let her off the hook somehow or something. I don't know. But in the end, he's just the bad guy again. And I'm just like, it didn't sit right with me at all. And then, you know, Catherine O'Hara dying was like, okay, that's fine. That's part of a story. That's fine. She goes off and okay. But then Astrid and Lydia, they live happily ever after. And like, I don't know. I just felt really bad for Beetlejuice.
It's funny because I think I hear you, and I hear the same frustrations that I have in terms of it's a sequel, and you want a sequel to be different from the original, and therefore there's some things you got to let go, but it doesn't, you know, negate the fact that there are still criticisms. And it's like after you've done too many things wrong, the things that you're trying to let go become kind of nullified. Like everything gets held against you. Because you do want to create space for a new story to happen, but it needs to be a story worth telling that is leading you somewhere that makes sense and justifies all the changes that you're making from the original. And this story doesn't do any of that. And to your point about Beetlejuice, and that's such a cool idea that I did not consider, that it could be a redemption story. Holy crap. What a fun, interesting like perspective to take, because he not only agrees and upholds his part of the deal with saving Astrid, he also saves everyone and himself whenever he disposes of Rory and Delores. So like twice he saves everyone's bacon. And yet still, gets shuttled
nothing
off. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not cool. I had a largely similar experience. It sounds like.
Oh, really? Somebody threw up in the theater?
Okay. Okay. Maybe a minimally similar experience.
Okay, go.
But the runtime in theory is fine. My big fear was that they were going to bloat this thing up, overwrite it, and turn it into a 2-hour and 10-minute movie that isn't really justified, because they keep trying to ground everything and expand the world beyond what it needs to be. And yet it's an hour and 45-minute movie that just feels like a 2-hour and 10-minute movie, because they do too much. They don't know what story they want to tell at the end of the day. And I went in with so much goodwill. I hadn't seen anything. And on the way I wasn't even having that good of a day. And I was like, I don't know if I should go see it, because I don't want to bring my poopy attitude into this, beautiful world. And I was like, but you know what? I'm just going to do it right now, because if I wait until later tonight, and I saw it on Thursday, the opening day, I was afraid that the theater was going to be too packed and I'm going to get seated next to someone that I don't want to be next to, and they're going to be drinking or annoying. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go now, and I'm going to find a way to get myself into the mood. And so I'm on the way there, I'm like pumping Harry Belafonte, and just singing. And I was just so happy by the time I got to the theater, because literally over the past week, maybe 20 times I've watched that end sequence where she comes home from school. She starts singing. We cut to Beetlejuice in the waiting room. I watched the whole thing, like roughly 20 to 25 times. Like it gives me so much joy. And so like I watched that. I'm listening to Harry Belafonte on the way over. I get into my seat and they start the intro, and I'm like giddy. I'm like fully 100% goodwill. Like I'm laughing because it's all the right vibes, right? We have Danny Elfman just pumping away, boom, 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 boom. We're like got these really sweet close-ups of this model. It's fresh, but it's the same. And we're like zooming around, but it's still nice and slow. We're really getting to see all the details, and boom, 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 boom. And then they cut to Lydia telling her story, and I'm like, okay, yeah, guys, set the mood. This is fine. A little recap for those who may have forgotten a little bit. And then we cut to her doing a TV show, and my heart dropped. Because this is about the most derivative cliche approach they could possibly take. And I'll come back to all of that later, but I still maintained goodwill, really throughout the entire film. And it wasn't until I hit the lobby where I was just more and more realizing how much I didn't like this movie. And it wasn't for lack of trying. I really put my best audience foot forward. And they did everything they could possibly do to make me not like this whole experience. It just didn't work. And I think a lot of it starts with what you're talking about with Keaton, although I only think he's maybe 30% of the problem. Like, he didn't bring his best Beetlejuice, and it's all the stuff you're talking about, the voice, the physicality just wasn't there. And there were moments where he could have turned it on. Like, those moments were absolutely present, but there were a lot of moments where he couldn't, where the opportunities just weren't there. And that goes to the writing of not giving him, look, the energy that he brought in that first movie, the way I've described it in the past is like, it's a used car salesman trying to make quota at the end of the month who's doing like coke nonstop. like he's just desperate, and he's full of, guile, and he's trying to bamboozle anyone he can into giving him what he wants. He's always acting out of desperation. And there's maybe one line in the entire first film where he kind of breaks that character. And it's that moment when Lydia is talking to him, and she's like, I want to be over there. And he's genuinely confused why anyone in the world would want to be on his side of the fence. And he just says, why? Hey, you know what? You got your reasons, and that's fine, but I can't do anything from over here. I got to help you over there. And he just goes right back into car salesman mode. And those opportunities are not here in this film very often. They're there, but sparingly. And whenever they finally give him that chance, and that's a writing problem. That is 100% a writing problem. Until they give him those opportunities, and it's like he's on his heels, he's leaning back, and he's not punching that extra gear. Why that is, honestly, it kind of made me worried for his health. Is he just not feeling good? Because the Keaton I know always brings it. Or maybe he's just a dramatic actor and that's what he likes doing now. He's kind of left, the kooky stuff in the past. Maybe. I don't know. But there was some gap between his performance and the character that he invented. And this is, as much as it was written in the film, that first one, he invented this character. I don't care what they wrote. Sorry, you were going to say.
Oh, no. I couldn't agree more. And it didn't help that when we see Beetlejuice, most of the time, it is in the afterlife. Mm-hmm. It doesn't help because if you think about the first one, a lot of the first times the first time you see anything about Beetlejuice, it's his hand sticking up out of the ground trying to get a fly to come to him, and he catches the paper.
Fly. He's reading the but it's still just his hands, and he's reading the paper looking for a job.
No, well, I mean in the first one.
Yeah,
in the first one.
In the first one, he's
right.
Let's see.
Yes.
Look at the wanted ads, and he looks at the obituaries.
Yes, exactly, and he sees them, and the couple that just died, and then we see his hands with the fly, and he catches the fly, and eats it, and we're not seeing him. And then when we actually see him, it's like he's little and he's in the model, and like in these other scenarios, but in the real world, really.
Yes.
Most of the time, and so now we're not only seeing him full on normal size and doing normal stuff, like instead of seeing just his hands, we're seeing him fully on. There's no mystery behind it, so he has to bring it more so than he did even in the first one, because we need to be reminded of the nutso that this guy is, and then to give him a backstory where he was married and then she's coming after him. There was no purpose to that. And there was no purpose to Willem Dafoe's character either. Like, why? Why have either of those two things going on? And the whatever on his head, it didn't even look good. It looked like it looked fake, like, I don't know.
Oh, on Willem Dafoe's head. Yeah,
Willem Dafoe's head.
Yeah.
It's like,
that one took me out too.
Yeah, who looked at it? Literally looked like somebody just slapped it on his head and it was just a prop.
And that one, I think, goes to directing. Like, you got to hold Tim Burton accountable for this entire thing, because if you look at all the rest of the wardrobe, the production design, the makeup, it's all top tier stuff.
Agreed.
They did what he asked them to do, and it's on him. It's on his head. Same thing with the script. There's no way he should have read this script and said, "Oh, this is capturing the essence of this universe." He should have pulled that card immediately and said, no, we need to do a page one rewrite.
I couldn't agree more.
Some elements, right? But you can't, fine, we can keep Astrid and, the idea of her dad, and I'll get to all that in a minute, but Tim Burton really should have had a better pulse of this world. And it felt like, whether it's him or it was the writers, they just said, oh, this universe is all about just being kooky and seeing a bunch of dead people. Let's just cook up a bunch of scenarios with kooky dead people, and went for it. Like, it's missing everything that made the first movie sing. And I'm about to dive into all of that, and it's buckle up. But the good stuff, because I don't want to like just drill down on the bad. But the good stuff, I completely agree about Catherine O'Hara. She made my heart sing every time she was on screen. She nails that character, this kooky artist who no one can really take seriously, but she takes herself very seriously, even if it doesn't look like she is. She is. She's playing her idea of her art all the way to the bone, and that's what that looks like. And it's really fun. And I thought Winona Ryder completely understands Lydia. I loved seeing her take this character back on. She understood the voice. It's a different voice from her normal voice. And she nailed it. You know, she nails the physicality. I just wish they wrote a better character that honored Lydia more. And I will absolutely be drilling down heavily on that in a minute. But let's, and look, anytime you get to work with Willem Dafoe and Monica Bellucci, I get it. Like, I would write parts for them as well. You know what? Let's go. So before I get going, I just want everyone to know what I'm about to say is honestly, it's coming from a deep, sincere place of anger and rage. But underneath that,
it's love.
Is somewhere more anger and rage, and then there's love down there somewhere in there of this universe because of how much it actually means to me. And so let's talk about the video that I think most people have probably seen. It's been floating around for a while. It's that Matt Parker, Trey Stone, or Matt, I forget, I get their names, Matt and Trey, the South Park guys, who are doing this clinic for these students. And they're talking about storytelling. Like, you can write a story where things just happen, right? And then this happens, and then this happens, and this happens. But what you really want are things that are connected, where your character wants something, you know, they want to go to the store, but their car's broke down. Therefore, they take a ride on the bus, and they get on the bus, but the bus is being driven by, you know, a cracked out guy who stole the bus from someone else, you know? Therefore, they have to jump off the bus, and therefore they're waiting for the bus to slow down, and they jump, but they land in a river, you know, and it just, like, all these things are connected all because someone wanted to go to the store. And it just leads you further and further and further down a crazy path that eventually leads to some logical resolution. But it's all tied and tethered together. This movie is not tied and tethered together. In order to help illuminate that, we're going to go mostly through the big beats of the first film, which was full of dominoes falling. Dominoes being, you know, very... One doesn't fall without the one before it slamming into it. Like, you can't have that last domino fall without the first one falling. Otherwise, it's a completely disconnected experience. And so every moment in the first film was connected and propelled us through the story effortlessly. And that's what gave us a sense of going on a ride. Okay, so Barb and Adam want a staycation to enjoy their house and each other, right? But before they can start, he needs glue. Which makes sense because we spent that entire opening title sequence miring the model, right? We were just floating through this model, and it's just so deeply ingrained. We kind of inherently understand why he needs the glue. Like, and even if you don't think about it, like, it's built into the story one way or another. The writers were connecting all these dots from the very opening frame. And that's how much love and thought they put into that world. Okay, so he needs to go to the store, right? Therefore, they go to the store, but swerve on the way home to not kill an animal, and they die. This sends them home where they can finally be alone and trouble-free. That's what Adam says, right? Babe, I think our worries are over now. But their house is sold to annoying city slickers. Therefore, they need to scare them away. But they're not very good ghosts. Therefore, they make friends with Lydia, who's not afraid of them, right? They're trying their best to scare everyone, but they're not very good ghosts, which attracts Lydia. Quite the opposite. They make a friend. They're trying to scare people away, but they make a friend in the process. And that's how big, but she, despite not being afraid, she tries to help them and also tells them they need a better routine. Therefore, Barb and Adam see if Beetlejuice can help. But that guy is kind of creepy. Therefore, they possess the family and force them to do a song and dance against their will. But that backfires because it's hella fun and the family wants to do it again. Therefore, Adam and Barb decide to be friends with the family because they actually really like Lydia. But before they can call a truce, Ortho exorcises them. Therefore, Lydia calls on Beetlejuice, which triggers the whole final act of chaos. Like, that's all continuously connecting together. One decision leads to another decision, leads to another decision. Like, all these things are happening because Adam needed glue. Like, it's all absolutely tethered and connected. And it keeps us engaged with the core characters who all have wants and needs and obstacles. And along the way, it also creates a lot of space and opportunity for humor. All the jokes are coming out of this story that's happening. So, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice feels tangential and coincidental. Even the ghost boy that you're talking about, it's just a coincidence that she meets this guy because she crashes her bike. That's lightly tethered into what's going on, I guess, kind of, sort of. And so at the beginning, though, Lydia is haunted by Beetlejuice. Then her dad dies. Then she needs to get her daughter, but finally we get a but her daughter doesn't like her. But she goes anyway. She doesn't really do anything to earn her daughter coming away with her. She just goes. Then they have the funeral, and it's fine. But Lydia's manipulative boyfriend corners her into an engagement. And that'll happen after a while. In the meantime, Beetlejuice is fleeing his ex-wife and also a cop who is an actor. And Astrid meets a boy, and Delia wants to mourn her husband, and Lydia wants to leave. But the boy is actually a ghost who's taken Astrid. Therefore, they go to the underworld to save her. You can just kind of see it's all slapped together with a bit of propulsion here and there, and lots of stagnation and just becauses. Like, things are happening because the writers just want them to happen. And the problem is, I think we are just not anchored at all in this universe. You know, there's no Barb and Adam to guide us through this chaos. Right in that first film, we were always, well, not always, but for the most part, tied to Barb and Adam, and they were guiding us through the underworld, and we felt their confusion, which was confusing to us, but we understood why it was confusing because the characters themselves were lost. Like, this reads like a stereo manual. Like, none of it made sense, and that, because we had a way to relate to that, it made it really fun. It made it a really fun and entertaining experience because we weren't alone. You know, we were empathetically connecting with our lead characters. And we could see their hopes and letdowns, and that kept us connected. And we could also see when they were bucking the system or how their plans would backfire. Like, that was all really, really fun. In this film, there's no momentum. We're just constantly switching stories, and it kills any flow or continuity of emotion or creation of momentum. Like, at no point are we able to just stay with anyone because of all these random subplots. Each new character and subplot just meanders away from the fun aspect, and yet it's still all too thin to create any sense of like catharsis of a good drama. Like, it's all just a waste. Everything that they do in here is very, very wasteful and disconnected from telling any actual story. Like, you have at the beginning, the way we introduce ourselves to the underworld, you have this random artist like was working with Delia who falls down a manhole and goes to the underworld, which is a bad segue because it's a completely meaningless character who we never see again. And then we meet a janitor who, you know, Danny DeVito, which is cool, but still ultimately meaningless. You can't just say this is a really awesome actor, therefore you care. We need some reason to care about anything that's happening, and he's just there to accidentally revive Delores, right? He gets that electric shock, then she springs together and then kills him. And so now we've had two meaningless characters die because she kills the janitor, DeVito, and also the dry cleaner, and then Bob. And it's just repetitive, right? It's a demonstration of power. The first time you see it, you're demonstrating her power. Okay. But you're not killing anyone important, so there's no real stakes there. And the souls themselves don't seem to give her any extra power or ability. These are just not good deaths that propel the story forward or increase the stakes in any meaningful way. Instead, it just introduces the detective who also plays no significant role in the plot or character arcs, as Todd said. And then the detective loops in Beetlejuice. That's basically his whole function, because he gets to the end of the film, busts in, freezes, and then unfreezes and goes away. Like, talk about minimizing Willem Dafoe. That's kind of insulting. As an audience member, anyway. I want more from my Willem Dafoes. And then killing Bob is our first semi-real punch in the gut. But there's really no surprise, because they already revealed her power during her introduction. So this feels incredibly repetitive at this point, to just let her pop up and kill someone, then disappear until it's convenient for her to pop up again. Her appearances are entirely unmotivated and unearned by the story. It's just when the writers want her or want something to happen in the story and to make something up. Like, it's not tethered and connected. But that's not even my biggest gripe. My biggest gripes are really about Lydia and therefore the women as they're portrayed. Lydia is not Lydia. This is not my Lydia. This Lydia is a trembling, naive wimp, right? That it just, nothing they're doing is honoring the original film's arc or story beats or approach in any way. You don't have to retell the same story, but you do need to honor what the characters went through in the first story. And this is something a lot of sequels get wrong. They think because we had a really interesting arc, you just want to repeat that same arc, which means you have to undo the first arc. You have to reset the character. But the problem, and even worse for this film, is that just isn't the arc that this character went through in the first place. And one of the things that really bugged me was Lydia wants to destroy the model town to get rid of Beetlejuice. I mean, it's an offhand comment. She just kind of says it because nothing in this film is really motivated or earned. But she's just like, I want to destroy that, that thing. She would never get rid of the one connection with Adam and Barb that she has. That seems very callous and insensitive and not like her at all, because she wasn't just a goth girl who could see ghosts. That's so reductive and honestly inaccurate. She was incredibly sensitive because she herself didn't feel seen by the living. This is what made Adam and Barb so good for her. It took connecting with the ghosts for her to feel seen and healed. We didn't really talk about this last week, but she had like this subtle, nuanced, light touch discussing suicidal ideation and connecting with them. And that's why when she's talking to Beetlejuice, she's like, I want to be over there. Like, there's so many little offhand comments that she makes where she's wanting to not be alive anymore. And her connection with the dead, the dark side of her, allowed her to heal and join the world of the living, which is why that ending is so good. She's with kids. She's alive. She's wearing brighter colors. She's light off her feet and she's singing and dancing. Like, that's so cool to see someone take this complete 180, but not lose that part of herself. It just made up her entire self. That's an amazing arc. She was never a weak character. She was self-assured and confident. She was just disconnected and alone. And that's a very different concept that they're blurring. And it speaks to their lack of understanding humanity and this character in this universe. Like, I'm trying not to be too harsh on the writers because I'm already taking them out to the wood shop. And so,
well, you're already there, so keep going.
And so Lydia having this stupid show is a slap in the face. She just sees all ghosts now. What? Having a TV show is so unimaginative and boring. It's like one step removed from making her a creative director at an advertising agency where she's like up for promotion. And worse, it's never even utilized again. We introduce it and immediately throw it away for the rest of the film. It's completely meaningless drivel. Like, it's all fodder. This entire movie is just stacked to the brim with fodder. Like, I think if I was going to rewrite it, and why not? I can't ruin anything here. But if I was going to advise them to give her a different path, I would say she should have been a veterinarian. Like, it's not necessarily breaking the scales of originality, of course. Like, we've seen, vets, but to me, it makes so much more sense for her character and could be utilized in so many more interesting ways, especially whenever, and I think it just makes sense when you really think about some of the subtle things that we're doing in the first film, because Beetlejuice was pretty loving towards animals. Like Adam and Barb died in order to not harm a dog. Lydia got a C in science because she wouldn't dissect a dead frog. Like there was this kind of internal moral outrage. It's against my religion. Like she didn't like the idea of what they were doing. And so in Beetlejuice, the one harm you see done to an animal, I believe, is Beetlejuice killed and ate a fly. He was the bad guy. The bad guy is killing an animal or an insect. Like, so we could see and understand our characters through how they treated other living creatures. That's a pretty cool, very subtle, nuanced way to be thinking about the world that you're creating and the characters who inhabit it. And so making Lydia a vet would give her a chance to demonstrate how she's grown in the last 30 years and how she uses her sensitivity and understanding of life and death to be a better physician to animals and help their owners. Like there's such a really cool, interesting thing. And then as the film progressed, she could then be challenged. Like, let's say a human is having a problem. Like, well, I don't understand how to work on humans, but I know how anatomy works. And that could give her something to rise to the challenge against. And you could do silly, fun throwaway jokes like and I think this would fit so well with her character, but like she's trying to save a cow who keeps eating the wrong bush, and it dies on her. And yet she sees the cow resurrect as a ghost and it's living a happy life and able to eat its stupid bush now. And it's kind of a silly throwaway joke that's completely built into this universe and also makes sense of her sensitivity towards animals and to, the dead, and gives her an opportunity to console the owners of this cow while also making comment like, look, I eat meat. I'm not a vegan or vegetarian. But I think it makes sense for her to be one, and to represent that in the story would be a really cool way to further her character and the way she approaches the world. Like there's so many missed opportunities by throwing away her career choice. And generally the women in this movie feel like they just fall apart without their men in their life. That's so shameful. I'm sorry. Like Astrid misses her dad and hates her mom. So we're creating conflict between, a mom and her daughter for some reason. Like I get you want to have some conflict there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Like Lydia is for some reason this weakling incapable of speaking up for herself. Delia is falling apart at the seams after losing Charles, which is the most logical of all these, to be fair. But taken in whole, the full context of this film, it's not a very good look. And this is one of the stingers. Reconciliation of Lydia and Astrid only comes after a forced emotional family moment where good old dad, tells them they need each other. Like dad arbitrarily saves the day. And then same thing, like Beetlejuice has to save the day multiple times. Like at what point do they ever take ownership? And I think this is a really large reversal of the first film. Barb is the one who batches Beetlejuice. She, like in her struggle, right? Beetlejuice ejects her into the sand world, and she manages to wrangle a sandworm and take him out. Like she's given a disadvantage and turns it to her advantage. Like that speaks a lot about her character and what she's doing in this universe. The women were just so much more stronger, even if flawed, which is even better. Make strong women, but also make them flawed, because guess what? They're people. Delia, right, commanded Charles around, which challenged Lydia. This is my stepmom, and there's, this built-in conflict there. But Lydia knew who she was, yet still needed to grow and find connection, but did try to speak up for herself and Adam and Barb. That takes strength as a kid to speak up to your parents, even if she's doing it kind of, in this shy kind of way, and like she's not screaming and stomping her feet, which is, again, even better because she's not that kind of person. She's not a child. She speaks and she's not heard. She's not paid attention to at any step of the way, but that doesn't say much about her. If anything, it reinforces why she feels the way she feels. And so then on top of that, like you get to Adam and Barb. Adam was not the one who was really helping anything. It was Barbara. she was the one that wanted to make peace and resolve the conflict with the family living in their house. Like, she has to push against Adam. Adam's like, no, let's just finish the job. Let's do this. And she's like, no. I really like Lydia. I think we let's learn to live with them. And he goes along with it. Like, the women were really strong characters. They were very strong. They were taking charge in a fully dynamic setting where characters had wants and needs and tried to change each other's minds. It was a healthy conflict of normal family dynamics. At no point was it just, we're going to make strong women to show strong women. They were just people. And that was just their function in these particular families. It could have easily have been slightly different if they wanted it to be, but this was the most interesting, compelling story to tell. And they did it in a way where no one was on the outside looking in. Everyone had their own interest and were, trying to push their own agenda forward. And that is such a much cooler way. And that's not even getting into the dead women. Like, you have even the woman sawn in half, right? Beetlejuice at the very end is trying to feel her up, and she slaps him and shoos him away. And Beetlejuice walks away like, what's her problem? And Beetlejuice is a sexist, misogynistic guy who's trying to downplay it. And I love, if you watch the physical comedy that's happening at the very end with the shrunken headed guy, the Bob of that world, it's so funny because even without saying anything, Beetlejuice has so much to work with. Michael Keaton has so much to work with against this prop, this puppet. And you can see the way he's interacting with it and getting frustrated because he's over here trying to give a spiel and this guy just slowly turns his head and stops paying attention. And he's like, all right. And he just moves on. Like, there's so much going on. And then, you have the woman at the window, you have the Juno, the caseworker. Like, every woman in that universe had so much autonomy. And yet in this universe, none of them do. This is such a poor representation of good women that I will rectify at the end of when we get to the recommendations. I'm almost done.
Okay.
This
I'm letting you cook, man. It's all good.
Let's talk about the comedy. This kind of comedy and many types rely on physicality that should be embedded in the script by giving your characters things to do. Right. So, for instance, in the first film, it was very physical, allowing Ortho and Delia to tour the house. They were going room to room and mocking it. And there's so much energy and the frame was really wide. The humor, which wasn't funny to us, the audience, because the humor that they were using was aimed at each other. It was characters talking to each other, trying to make each other laugh and one-up each other on how awful the interior design is on this house, which is also another little joke because we meet the interior designer, the realtor, right? Their cousin or whoever Jane was in that first film. And so there's all these little layers of inner jokes, inside jokes between the characters. And I love that kind of humor because it's not aimed at the audience. It's aimed at each other, which builds their connection. It allows us to see them as humans connecting with each other and trying to impress each other. And you can see those dynamics take shape through the kinds of jokes they're telling. And they save the jokes towards the audience for Beetlejuice, who was doing it at the expense of the characters he was talking to. And so it's still based around the story. Everything was motivated. All the humor was allowing the characters to be physical based on what was happening in the story. And the humor was depending on if we're in on a joke or not. And the stuff that we found funny was always going to be at the expense of the characters and also made us recognize how much of a piece of crap Beetlejuice is. Because he's just mocking everyone. He doesn't take anyone serious. Like, it's so thoroughly thought out. In this movie, there's almost nothing for these characters to do the entire film. They're mostly just standing around talking. But give them some action. Like Delia, the clip that we played is Delia taking photos of herself, capturing her perfect primal screen. It's so much fun for us and gives the actors something to react to and something to do. But those moments are very few and far between. This plays like a bad sitcom where they just announce their feelings and yell punchlines to the audience. Like when we meet Astrid, her big first joke, if you can call it that, is those other girls at the school are teasing her. And she says, "We'll see how funny you are when you're having your third kid after your second divorce." Like, that's such a weak punchline, and I'm sorry, and the kids all shut up like, huh? Like, that's so weak. There's no teenager in America who's going to hear that jab and feel like they got. Like, kids, and especially if you're at a boarding school, obviously I didn't go to one, but you are sharp. We were sharp in my school. We were doing nothing but talking trash to each other the entire day. So your wit is sharp as hell. And I just don't think any kid in America is going to hear a jab like that and let it go. They're going to just zip you right back because that's a terrible punchline. And then the running joke with Wolf Jackson, Willem Dafoe's character, is you've got to keep it real. That's the entire punchline. And this is funny to them. This was barely a good punchline 20 years ago. And even that was just making fun of the punchline itself. You've got to keep it real was the joke. It was never intended to be like funny in and of itself. It was making fun of the idea of using that as any kind of idea. Like, at no point in the history of comedy is you've got to keep it real ever funny. This one was really offensive. Beetlejuice's final punchline exiting after he explodes is should have got married in Vegas. That's a punchline. And the frustration, the reason why I hate those punchlines is because they're aimed at the audience. They're not aimed at each other. It's not something that's building character, that gives us an understanding of relationship dynamics or anything like that. It's there intended to make the audience laugh. And they're bad jokes. There's nothing inherently funny.
It's like they're saying it to themselves almost, and not to further the relationship between a couple of characters. He's not saying it to Lydia, right?
Yes.
You know, and I didn't get that either. If there's a punchline that's said and I'm sitting there thinking, what, then it's not good. I should immediately be like, oh, whoa, okay, got it.
Yeah.
And there were almost none in this film.
So frustrating to be in a comedy. And I think part of this is also why there's so many close-ups. This movie is full of close-ups. Most of the wides and mediums are for blocking shifts to get us back into close-ups, so that if the characters are moving around, we cut to a medium or a wide in order to reestablish the geography so that we can then move into close-ups. And comedies aren't close-ups. Like, it's very rare to do a comedy, especially what should be a physical comedy, in close-ups, because you can't see the actor move. You can't see them gesture. You can't see any of that. And it just loses the connections by isolating each character, so none of them feel tethered to each other, because we only ever see them in isolation. If you look back through the first film, like, it's mostly mediums and wides. Like 80% of the film, at least, is mediums and wides, and they move into close-ups when there's something important that they want the audience to feel and connect with. And I say that just because it's reinforcing the idea that there was nothing for these characters to do. There's no reason to be in a medium. There's no reason to be in a wide, because there's nothing to see.
Great point.
This was a writing failure at every phase. And frankly, like, I have some other nitpicks, and this gets into, like, why not? Like, I would have let this stuff slide if they had told a more compelling story. Like, people die and immediately go to the waiting room? That's not what the waiting room is for. Like, you're supposed to go to your haunt. You die, you go to your haunt. Like, we see Charles immediately go to the waiting room. We see Delia immediately go. And the same thing with not the janitor, the artist immediately finds himself. Like, that's not what the waiting room is. You nincompoops. Like, unless you're being summoned or you're needing help, that's when you go to the waiting room.
Great point. That's not a minor thing. That's huge, because at the at the beginning, not Barb, but the couple at the beginning of the first one, they go back to their haunt. They go back to their house. And
they're confused, and that's when they get their guide, and they can start understanding how to be a ghost. And so they mess that up, and then this is even more ticky-tack. The civil servants of this underworld weren't suicides. Like, it's fine. I mean, that's negligible.
That's a huge one. No, that's big. That is big, man. Ortho calls that out, man.
Yep. It's a part of the universe. And so I think those just kind of underscore the lack of understanding that these writers had. They sat down and said, what's some fun, kooky, silly adventure that we can go on? And let's just pack it to the brim with that. And then in the way there, they just disrespected everyone along the way. And to that end, the music, like, I needed more Danny Elfman. Like, he was not utilized. You have Danny Elfman. What more do you need? Like,
Yeah.
and so the music pieces that they use in this film felt incredibly arbitrary and unmotivated by the story. In the first film,
they used Sigur Rós. They used a Sigur Rós song. What the hell are you doing using a Sigur Rós song in a Beetlejuice movie? It was completely out of, the moment I heard it, I thought I knew exactly what it was, and I was like, what the hell is going to happen? What? Danny Elfman is supposed to be doing this. I'm not supposed to recognize any of this stuff unless it's the motif that you hear at the beginning. Mm-hmm. None of it should be recognizable. And yet I'm hearing a Sigur Rós song. What the hell are you doing? It's like other movies that all of a sudden, use Welcome to the Jungle, by
Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses or an AC/DC song. It's always AC/DC or Guns N' Roses, always in every movie. And you're just like, okay, whatever. But Sigur Rós, like, ridiculous. Anyway, I couldn't agree more.
And the first film, those music pieces happen out of story needs. Like they do the Deo, right? The banana song, because they were trying to achieve something, and it backfires, and they do it again as a reward for something else. Like Lydia, and now it's a demonstration of Lydia's new appreciation of life. It's a celebration. They completely ruined it. It's just, I guess it's time for a song. So we'll have the choir singing Deo or whatever, they sing. I'm pretty sure it's Deo. And then we'll have, a song for the wedding because it's time for another song. Like, it was never motivated by story. There's no reason to have those things happen. It's just stuff happening. And if you walked out and you said, well, that was kind of fun, but you also, like, there's a lot of people who are enjoying this movie, and I'm sorry if I just spat all over it. Well, I'm not actually sorry.
Don't be
you
sorry.
deserve to be woken up. Take the red pill. But if there was a sinking feeling like, yeah, it was fine, I had a good time, and I'll never watch it again. These are the reasons you felt that way, is because there was no emotional connection. And all of these reasons add up to why that was. There was just no constant through line. Honestly, I don't know that there was a plot. There were a bunch of subplots. But if you were to tell me what the plot of this movie is, I don't think you could tell me. Because what sets this whole thing in motion is Charles dying, and they go back to their hometown, to this town, in order to bury him. And they do that at what I guess you could consider the beginning of the second act. I couldn't even tell you where the first and second acts really start and end, which if you're writing is fine, but if you're analyzing, it's pretty rough, because really the first act ends whenever you establish the really big driving force, the need. That's what propels you into the second act and through the rest of your story. The first act is usually how you're establishing your world and what Michael Arndt calls your stasis. Like, this is homeostasis, and now they're going to get shoved out of their comfort zone, have to go on an adventure until they can reestablish homeostasis. And it just kind of all happens. It's just random stuff happening because the writers want it to happen. And that's a massive page one problem. Like, you need to just scrap it all, start all over. I think, if anything, you can keep Astrid, you can keep the husband, and you establish them as a family. And if you want to kill the husband, you do that at the beginning of the film, and now you have a new struggle of how do we live when our dad is a ghost. And now you can go through all these other kind of beats and maybe introduce something else. But there's a simple driving force that keeps you connected with all these characters the entire time, so that you can establish and then break family dynamics so that you can heal them or whatever. Like, there's a million paths you can take, and they took most of them, unfortunately. Like,
Yeah, I remember in the first one being really sad at the beginning. When I say I remember, I mean last week when we watched it. I'm sorry, what's the couple's name again?
Adam and Barb.
Adam and Barb, thank you. When Adam and Barb die, I'm really sad because we spend just the first 5 minutes immediately loving them. You know, they're happy. They're happy together. He does his thing, which is this model. She does her thing, and they don't want to be out of each other's sight. You know, like you mentioned last week, and you're just like feeling for them, and they're excited about this thing that's upcoming, and then they die. And I just remember that emotion of feeling sadness. Like I was taken, like that. They were taken from me is how I felt, you know, like immediately. And I felt sad and loss. And then I feel fear. So I'm going through all of, and then, you know, like discovery, you know, I'm discovering with them what's going on. And then annoyance because the family is annoyed. I have all of these emotions that I'm going through that I'm feeling, starting with sadness. And I feel like what you just said would have been a great start. Introduce us to the dad and take him away from us. Because he seems like a great...
He did.
He, right? Like he explored a lot. He took Astrid with him in places. They went hiking and all that stuff. And she loved it. And they were, you know, they had plans to do things. Introduce that to us and then take it away from us. Give me that sadness so that I can discover how to get out of it, which is exactly what Lydia did in the first one, which you just said. She discovered how to live again or how to enjoy life again. I feel like let's go on that journey with Astrid now. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be with Lydia. Lydia, she could be more of an afterthought if you really, not afterthought's the wrong word. She could be more of a, you know, sub character for Astrid if you put us in the same position that you put us in with Lydia in the first one, right?
Yeah.
So okay, if the point here of making a new one is to pass on this kind of like, now we're following this, you know, character, cool. But you like set us up the same way so that we feel that familiarity immediately, and I immediately lock on to Astrid like I did lock on to Lydia, and then have us go on that journey. So.
Absolutely. And it's so bewildering to me because I know so many women who love Lydia. Like that was an important part of you didn't see a lot of teenagers playing teenagers. Like I think Jenna Ortega is fine. She did a fine job. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with, you know, an early 20 something playing a teenager. That's par for the course. Totally fine. But for women, it was probably really nice to see a 16-year-old playing a 16-year-old. And then on top of that, letting her be dark and connecting to this darkness. I don't know how much of that you really got to see in pop culture, you know, in that era, in the 80s and 90s. And I think that's why she was such a central figure to so many women that I knew that just really loved and identified with her, because they got to see someone, you know, go through those emotions and not be judged for it and kind of celebrated for it. Like and there was just so much opportunity here and they threw it all away. And it's bewildering to me because we love this character and there was just so much more they could have done with it if they had just really stopped and considered how everything was operating. And I love everything you just said. I think that is such a much more fun way to refresh this world by making Astrid the center of attention and letting Lydia kind of be this guiding voice, because yeah, she's aged and that's okay too. You know, like she's got a life full of experiences now that we haven't seen. And that's a really fun way to demonstrate all of that. Yeah, they just dropped the ball. I saw this a second time and I went from being a little conflicted and not really liking it to hating it. Like that second viewing was rough. I
have never heard you talk like this.
I know.
In the how many now? 290 episodes. Maybe one other movie have I heard you talk like this about it. So
I'm usually kids gloves. I really, because I look up to everyone who's made a movie. but they dangerously touched something that I love. And so third rail stuff here. And maybe I'll feel bad about it tomorrow, but right now I feel like saying shame on these writers.
Well, not just the writers. You gotta, I mean, the buck has to stop with Tim, you know? Yep. Like, he can't look at this and say, yep, this is a good idea. And honestly, Keaton, too. I mean, look, you know, you're an actor, you sign up to do a role, and then you do that role, and you have to trust the director is like, yep, we got it. You did a great job, You know, so it's not all him. But he had to look at dailies. He had to see the lack of energy. He had to see the lack of like what this character was in his performance on a day-to-day basis. There's no way that he could get through 3 months of shooting and feel good about that, right?
No, in so many scenes, I'm watching Winona Ryder and Catherine O'Hara try to inject energy into the scene. Yes. Like, I can see them fighting to make it exciting and make it interesting. And it is absolutely not supported by the writing. And it's so frustrating because I can see they care. They're doing everything they can to make this an engaging ride. And it just pains me that they weren't given better material by our three head honchos. Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. Wow.
So that's, put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly couldn't agree more. And I walked out of it feeling like I was glad. I was almost glad, not glad that woman, got sick behind me or whatever, but glad I got my money back only because like, I was like, I just didn't get anything out of this. I really didn't. It was, sure. It was good to see Keaton, don the makeup again and everything, but story-wise, it didn't feel good. It felt broken up. I love how you described the but therefore. I mean, you literally painted it out like for both films. And it was, so if you skipped over a big section of our recording, you should go back when Wes starts explaining that, because it really explained how I felt walking out of the theater without me knowing. So thank you for that. Thanks, and I'm actually going to, I mean, I've seen that clip with them, Trey Parker, and them talking about that, but I haven't actually put that in my brain when I'm watching a film. So I think now maybe I won't think about that while watching the film, but maybe after I'll think about, was there a but therefore, throughout the film? Or maybe I'll think, how do I feel? Do I feel like that was good? Like that was connected and complete? Okay, I do. Now, was there a but therefore throughout? Yeah, there was. Yeah, there was. There was. Or no, that just feels disconnected. Why? Was there a but therefore? No. You're right. This is just bouncing back and forth between all these storylines that like it just takes the win. It's kind of like if you're watching a scene and there's a lot of edits. Sometimes it takes the energy out of it because I can't be in. And sometimes it adds energy, right? Like if you're in a car chase, of course, that's going to add energy, right? But if you're in a scene where you have two people talking, the fewer the cuts, the better, because that just heightens this stress of like I can't keep looking at these two people looking at each other, anymore. Please stop. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna take that, into my next watches of some films. So thank you for that,
man. Honestly, I could probably, if I let my mind wander, keep picking this thing apart. But all that to say, I guess, what are you going to recommend this week?
So this week I'm going to recommend a film that I haven't seen in a long time. Probably, I mean, almost 20 years now, but that I really loved. And I'm sticking with this Danny Elfman theme because he... I just think is like a brilliant writer. I'm going to recommend Big Fish, 2003. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Ewan McGregor film. I remember loving that film when it came out. I even bought a Big Fish shirt. I really liked it a lot. And I wonder if it holds up. I don't know, but I just remember loving it. So I'm going to recommend that. Danny Elfman scored it. So.
Very nice. Another Tim Burton film, written by John August, I believe. And so I frustrated with the direction of this movie and the way the women were written, wanted to recommend maybe the best screenplay I've ever read. And it's actually, this may surprise y'all, The Devil Wears Prada. It's probably the best script I've ever read. The efficiency, the voice, the tone, everything you see on screen is lived on the script, and it's done so efficiently. And that world is full of strong women who have different philosophies and ways of approaching the world, which allows them to easily conflict with each other to create, dramatic tension and resolutions and all kinds of stuff. Like, it's a really interesting world that's driven by really well-written women. And so if you want another approach, that's a really great read. And of course, the film itself is fantastic. Like, I truly love that movie. So the screenplay, and I'll see if I can link that in the show notes, The Devil Wears Prada script. Yeah, and stay tuned. Not next week. We're going to take a week off, quote unquote. We actually missed a week a couple weeks ago. And so this will give us a buffer so that I can have a little more time to edit and get the show up. And so we're going to take a week off, and then we're going to come back. And Todd mentioned this before recording last week, and I was like, yeah, I want to watch that. So we're going to take a look at Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock in Speed. Hey, pop quiz.
It's like you're running at an incredible rate, Harry.
So stay tuned for that in a couple weeks. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review. If there's something you want us to talk about, kinds of things you find interesting, let us know. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepodcast.com/Beetlejuice Beetlejuice.
ThePestlepodcast.com.
ThePestlepodcast.com.
Yeah.
Beetlejuice.
And our quote of the day is from the great Don Bluth. Oh, love this guy. With movies, you're always in search of a good story, one that everyone will relate to and love. Hence, Beetlejuice the first. And I think a lot of that has to do, at least for me, with the idea of like going through multiple emotions throughout the film. Yes, it can be a comedy. It can also be kind of a horror. It can also be kind of, sad. It can be, loving. And how cool is that to go through so many emotions in a span of, an hour and a half? It's pretty awesome. I don't think that there's many other mediums that can do that. Usually like with music, it's like, here's one feeling that I'm going to give you in 3.5 minutes or whatever it is, or 10 minutes, doesn't matter. But it's usually like a single feeling. With books, it takes longer usually. And it's like a longer drawn out process. But with movies, and one edit can change how you feel instantly. It's so freaking powerful, Great quote.
Love that. And I think that was their problem, is they didn't know what story they wanted to tell. Like, ultimately, I think they were trying to tell a story about 3 women who reconnect somehow. And they didn't really fully think through that story. Instead, they just threw a bunch of stuff at the wall instead of focusing first on, like you just said, I think you're absolutely right. Like, being able to experience all those crazy emotions in the first one gave so much catharsis by the end that the resolution was so fast and slapstick, it was okay because the ride was great and the emotional changes felt justified. They felt complete. In this, nothing felt justified or complete. It's just a bunch of random stuff happening, and they could have changed that by first figuring out what's the heart of this story, where do those beats fall, and what is going to connect them. Like, now that we know our start and our end, how do we tell this story through this world that we're entering? And they clearly never did that. And if they did, they must have had too many executives stepping in. But honestly, you got to take it back to Tim. He's the ultimate buck stops here. He's got all the power. You're not going to convince me Tim Burton doesn't have any power to determine where this story's going to go. He has all the power. And so you got to reconnect with the work that you made before you start to build on it, because this was tragic.
And with that, thank you guys so much for joining us Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If there's a comment that you'd like to make, please leave a comment, subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts or listen to those things, and suggest us to your friends. And if there's a film you'd like to see us pick apart or talk about, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you'd like us to cover. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll do it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.